My daughter-in-law had barely finished raising her voice when I told her to get out of my house. The words didn't tremble. They didn't crack. They came out steady, as if they had been waiting somewhere deep in my chest for years. Liana stared at me like she hadn't heard correctly. "You're being ridiculous," she snapped, brushing her hair back with that sharp, impatient motion she always used when she felt superior. "You can't just, I can," I said, "and I am." Michael stepped in front of her, eyes wide and confused. The way they'd looked since he was a boy who couldn't decide which parent to believe. "Mom, please." His voice was soft, almost pleading. "Let's just talk." "We have talked," I said. "We talked when you let your wife tell me I wasn't going to Hawaii. We talked when you looked at the floor instead of at me. And we talked every time you asked me to ignore something that cut me." I folded my arms not to defend myself, but to stop them from shaking with finally spoken truth. "Now I'm done talking." Liana's jaw clenched. "You're acting insane. We were trying to do what's best for everyone. You're old. Evelyn, traveling is stressful for you." And I stepped closer, not fast, not dramatic, just enough that she felt the shift in power. "This is my home," I said. "You chose your comfort over my dignity. Tonight, you can take that comfort with you." Her mouth twisted. "Unbelievable. You always play the victim." I didn't flinch. I had spent too many years apologizing for other people's behavior. "Get your things," I said. "You're leaving tonight." Michael swallowed hard. "If she leaves, I should go with her." "Yes." I answered. "You should." That stunned him. His lips parted, then closed again, like he was searching for words that refused to come. Raymond stood by the hallway doorway, his phone hanging uselessly in his hand. For once, he wasn't pretending to scroll through emails. He looked between me and them, silent, but present in a way he hadn't been in years. He didn't step in to soften things. He didn't tell me to calm down. He simply stayed still, as if he understood that this moment belonged to me. Liana laughed under her breath, a cold, humorless sound. "Fine, we're leaving. And don't expect us to come back begging." She grabbed her purse from the sofa and marched toward the door. Michael hesitated. His eyes met mine for a moment, just long enough for me to see the fear, the hurt, the confusion tangled inside him. But he followed her anyway. The door shut behind them with a final, hollow thud. The house was suddenly quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet in a way that stretched across the living room like a held breath. I sat down slowly, letting the weight of what I had done settle into my bones. I was aware of my heartbeat, steady and unbroken, and the strange calm that came with finally refusing to be erased. Raymond approached cautiously. "Evelyn," he said, "are you all right?" I nodded. "Better than I've been in a long time." He didn't push. He didn't question. He just sat across from me, hands clasped, waiting for whatever came next. But what came next didn't begin tonight. It had started days earlier, at a dinner table where my daughter-in-law told me I wasn't coming to Hawaii for Christmas. That was the moment everything began to shift. I can still hear the clatter of dishes from that night in Selwood. The way the sound filled the silence none of us were brave enough to break. Liana talked through most of the dinner, her voice bright and polished, the same tone she used whenever she wanted to own the room without looking like she was trying. "We finally booked everything," she said, cutting into her salmon. "7 nights right on the water. The place looks incredible." Michael nodded, too quickly, like he was trying to keep up with a rhythm she had already set. Raymond made a vague noise of approval while pretending to read something on his phone. I smiled because that is what I have always done, smiled first. Questioned later. "That sounds lovely," I said. Liana didn't look up as she spoke. "It will be. It's important that this Christmas is restful. You know, simple." "Of course," I answered, even though something about her tone pricked the back of my neck. So when do I need to be ready? Toward the end of the week, she finally lifted her eyes, and the shift was small but sharp. Oh, Evelyn, you're not coming to Hawaii for Christmas. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. I'm not. Michael stared at his plate. The muscles in his jaw tightened as if he were chewing on words he refused to release. Raymond tapped his phone screen like he had suddenly discovered a message that needed urgent attention. Liana continued breezily, as though she were telling me something obvious. We just thought it would be easier for you to stay home this year. The flights are long. The house has stairs, and you've said traveling is tiring. We don't want you putting unnecessary stress on yourself. I see, I said quietly. She nodded. Relieved I wasn't arguing. Exactly. It's really for your comfort. Michael finally spoke. So softly, I almost missed it. Mom, it's not a big deal. I turned to him. You didn't think it was worth mentioning. His shoulders rose and fell. We were going to bring you something back. Maybe next year will be better. Raymond kept his eyes glued to his phone, pretending the glow of the screen was more important than the fracture happening at his own table. Liana took a sip of wine and added, Besides, you always say you like a quiet Christmas. No, I said, I like a peaceful Christmas. That's not the same thing. Her smile tightened. Well, this is decided. Everything's booked. The air around me seemed to shift, not dramatically, not like a storm, but like a door clicking shut. Something inside me tightened with a clean, cold precision. It wasn't anger. Anger burns. This was different. This was clarity, sharp as a pin. I set my fork down. If this is truly what you've chosen, then thank you for telling me now. Liana leaned back, pleased with herself. Good. I knew you'd understand. Michael finally lifted his head enough to look at me. His eyes were guarded, full of guilt he didn't have the courage to name. Mom, we're not trying to hurt you. I know, I whispered. That's why it hurts. He blinked, but he didn't speak again. Liana stood to collect plates she had barely touched. Well, we should head out. Lots to finalize. Michael followed her without turning around. Raymond stayed seated a moment longer, then sighed heavily and put his phone down. Evelyn, I didn't know how to say anything. You didn't need to. I said, you already did. He left the table slowly, leaving me alone with cooling food and the echo of decisions made without me. Later that night, as I folded napkins and stacked mugs into the sink, that cold clarity returned in full. Their exclusion stopped feeling like an accident. It stopped feeling like a misunderstanding. It revealed something they didn't expect me to see. I did not fall asleep the night they told me about Hawaii. I sat in my quiet kitchen, letting the hours slip by while memories drifted in and out, as if they were testing me, asking whether I had been blind or simply hopeful. It hadn't always been like this. When Michael first married Liana, things were warm enough. She called me Mom Evelyn back then, always cheerful, always eager to show she fit in. I remember her dropping by with a basket of muffins she said she baked herself. Later I learned they came from a specialty shop in Lake Oswego. But at the time, I didn't care. I was just grateful my son had chosen someone who seemed kind. Over the first year, small things changed. I would call, and she'd answer with that quick, breathy tone. Oh, Evelyn, we were just about to head out. Can I call you later? But later never came. When I called again, she would apologize, blame errands, blame work, blame anything with a pulse except herself. Michael changed more quietly. It started with dinners. Liana would text, "We won't make it tonight." Something came up. Something was often a new restaurant opening or a co-workers gathering. I told myself young couples needed their space. I remembered a Sunday morning 2 years ago when I asked Michael if he wanted to stop by for breakfast. He hesitated, then said, "Liana thinks we should start our own traditions." He sounded like he was quoting someone else. A month later, when I planned a small family barbecue, Liana replied to my message with, "We'll try to make it." They didn't. When I called to check in, she said, "Oh, I thought Michael told you. We had to help a friend move." Michael never mentioned a friend, before or after. The more I think back, the clearer the pattern becomes. Liana wasn't pushing me away with force. She was nudging steady, consistent, like someone rearranging furniture while pretending nothing had moved at all. And I played along. I told myself families grow, dynamics shift, people get busy. I remembered the afternoon I waited at a cafe downtown. We were supposed to meet for coffee, just me and Liana. She texted 15 minutes before running late, 40 minutes passed. Then she texted, "Actually, sorry, something came up. Rain check." She never scheduled the rain check. When I told Michael later, he frowned. She must have forgotten. She has a lot on her plate. He said it gently, as if he needed me to agree or the entire structure of his marriage might bend under the truth. So I nodded, the way I had learned to nod, smoothing their discomfort before my own. And the erasing continued. Missed birthdays, shorter visits, quick hugs that never warmed. "Oops, didn't see your message. Oh, that must have slipped my mind. We thought you wouldn't want to come." The signs were there, all of them, scattered across years like breadcrumbs I refused to follow. I sat at my kitchen table now, hands wrapped around a mug gone cold, and realized something I had not wanted to see. I had been shrinking to make them more comfortable, softening corners, lowering expectations, cutting myself smaller and smaller so they wouldn't feel crowded. But shrinking had never been the solution. It had only made room for them to erase me without resistance. And that night, for the first time in years, I felt the shrinking stop. It happened 2 nights after the dinner in Selwood. I had stopped by Michael and Liana's house to drop off a small holiday tin of cookies I baked every year. I didn't plan to stay. I just wanted to leave it on the porch with a note. Old habits. I suppose still trying to be part of something that no longer had room for me. When I stepped onto their porch, I heard voices through the slightly cracked living room window. I wasn't trying to listen. I wasn't even sure at first who was speaking. Then I heard Liana's voice, sharp and impatient. "She's too much work. Michael." I froze. Liana continued, sounding irritated that she had to explain anything at all. "Every time we include her, she needs something, or she asks too many questions, or she walks too slow. I am not dragging her across an airport. I am not spending Christmas babysitting." My fingers tightened around the cookie tin. I waited for Michael to step in to say something. Anything. He didn't. Instead, his voice came low and uncertain. "Liana. She's my mom." And Liana shot back. "She is exhausting. She clings. You know she does. She wants updates on everything, wants to tag along to everything. Honestly, I think she gets jealous when we go places without her." I heard a soft rustle. Michael must have sat down. "She's not jealous," he said weakly. "She's just lonely sometimes. Not my problem," Liana replied, each word clipped. "I'm not letting her ruin this trip. You know she'll complain about the heat, the walking, the noise. Then she'll make us feel guilty for having fun." Michael didn't argue. He didn't defend me. He didn't even sigh. He just said, "Fine. You're right. We'll keep it how we planned." My heart didn't break. I used to think it would if I ever heard something like that, my son choosing silence over love, but it didn't break. It hardened. Liana added one last comment, a quiet laugh wrapped around cruelty. "You're lucky I put up with her at all. Some women would have drawn the line years ago." That was enough. I stepped backward from the window, careful not to make noise. I didn't want them to know I heard. Not yet. not when they still believed I was small enough to push aside without consequence. I placed the cookie tin gently on the porch railing. My hands shook only once before settling. I walked down their steps slowly, breathing through the sting behind my ribs. I didn't knock. I didn't call. I didn't confront them. I walked to my car, started the engine, and drove away with the truth, burning steady in my chest. Not the dramatic kind of truth that breaks a person open, the colder kind, the kind that rearranges everything inside you until the world looks different. This was not a misunderstanding. It was not distance or miscommunication or a rough patch between generations. It was a strategy, calculated, consistent, mutual. And the person who could have stopped it, the boy I raised, the man I loved more fiercely than my own breath, stood in the background and let her say every word. The heat of that stayed with me long after the house disappeared in my rear mirror. The morning after I overheard Liana, I tried to focus on anything except the sound of her voice calling me a burden. I washed the same mug twice. I folded a dish towel 3 different ways before settling on none of them. Raymond had already left for his part-time consulting job downtown, and the house felt heavier than usual, like it was holding its breath with me. Around 10, my phone buzzed. A new email from Raymond. The subject line read, "Maui property final details before Christmas." At first, I assumed he wanted me to look at something, maybe a bill or a document. Then I opened it. "Liana, here's the rental confirmation. 7 nights. Oceanfront. Full payment processed 6 weeks ago." My eyes skimmed the page. There were attachments, receipts, notes, even a message from the property manager about special holiday arrangements. Everything was booked, finalized, paid, months ago. But what stopped me wasn't the attachments. It was the line at the bottom. "And remember, don't tell her. She'll make it dramatic." I stared at the words until they blurred. My first instinct was that it must have been a mistake, some misunderstanding about another her, but there was no other her. The pronoun was mine. A second later, my phone buzzed again. Another email from Raymond. "Evelyn, that message wasn't for you. Please delete it." He didn't even say sorry. He didn't even try to soften it. Just delete it. I read the original email again, slower this time. The details were precise, organized, neat. The kind of planning that takes effort, not a rushed, last-minute decision made out of confusion or forgetfulness. Months of preparation, months of intention, months of talking around me, over me, without me. I pressed the call button. Raymond answered quickly, too quickly, as if he'd been waiting for it. "Evelyn," he said, breath tight. "That was meant for Liana. I forwarded it wrong." "So I gathered." He cleared his throat. "It wasn't personal. We just thought." "You thought I would make it dramatic?" I said. My voice was quiet, and that quiet frightened him more than shouting ever could. He hesitated. I didn't mean it like that." "How did you mean it?" I meant. He stopped, searching for something believable. "I meant you get overwhelmed sometimes. Traveling is stressful for you. It just seemed easier." "For who?" I asked. He didn't answer. Silence crowded the line. Then I heard the truth land in his voice. "Evelyn, please don't make this harder." There it was again, that sickening twist of words. Make this harder. As if I were the problem. As if I hadn't spent years bending myself into smaller and smaller shapes to keep our family intact. I exhaled slowly, steadying myself. "You were going to leave for Christmas without telling me until the last minute." "It wasn't like that," he said. "But the email says exactly that," I replied. Another long silence. Then, quietly, he said, the one thing that confirmed everything Liana thought: it would just be simpler this way. So he let her decide for both of them. I ended the call without saying goodbye. My phone slipped into my palm, warm from my grip. And for several moments, I just stood there in my kitchen, staring at the floor tile beneath my feet. Not angry, not shocked, just insulted. The confusion I once clung to so tightly fell away like loose threads. There was nothing left to misinterpret. They had chosen the exclusion, planned it, agreed on it, hid it. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the beginning of something steadier than hurt rising inside me. The morning after the email, I walked into my home office with a steadiness I hadn't felt in weeks. The room was small, cluttered with old binders and banker boxes I hadn't opened in years. I used to avoid this space because it reminded me of Raymond's endless paperwork and Emily's old drawings tucked between files. But today, it felt like the only place I could breathe. I sat down, opened the drawer on the left, and pulled out the metal box where we kept old property documents. My hands moved almost on their own, flipping through manila folders marked with fading black ink, mortgage statements, insurance papers, a stack of receipts from years of repairs. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, only that something inside me insisted there was more to uncover. I found it near the bottom, a thick folder labeled Eastmoreland House, Initial Transfer. My breath tightened. Michael and Liana's house? I opened it slowly. The first page was the down payment transfer from years ago. I remembered that day clearly. Michael had called in the middle of the afternoon, excited, telling me they had found a place but needed help to secure it. I didn't hesitate. I transferred the money, 20% of the cost, without blinking. I flipped through the pages, expecting to see the formal transfer of my shared ownership to them. It should have been a simple form, signed and notarized, a standard step that usually followed. But the space where my signature should have been was blank. I frowned and kept flipping. Blank, blank again. Every place requiring my relinquishment of ownership was untouched. No signature, no date, no follow-up. I whispered, no, they didn't, but they had. The deed still listed me as co-owner, not a symbolic co-owner, a full legal one. The house in Eastmoreland, the house they decorated without asking, renovated without mentioning, rented out on weekends when they needed extra money, it was still half mine. I stared at the folder, letting the truth settle. Quiet shock first. Then a slow, unexpected relief curled beneath my ribs. After that came anger, not loud, not wild, but controlled and precise. The same cold anger that had risen in me the moment Liana said I wasn't going to Hawaii. I heard a soft knock at the doorframe. Raymond stood there, hesitant. "You've been in here a long time," he said. "I found something." I answered. He stepped inside, brow creased. "What is it?" I handed him the top page. "Look at the signatures." He scanned it. His jaw tightened. "They never filed this no." I said, "They didn't." "Did they tell you no?" My voice didn't shake. "But they should have." He held the page as if it weighed too much. "This means you still own half the house." "I know." He exhaled, long and heavy. "Evelyn, what are you going to do?" I didn't answer immediately. I gathered the pages into a clean stack, aligning the corners, smoothing the edges. Each movement slowed my heartbeat, steadied my breathing. I felt something inside me shift, not rage, not vengeance, just control. For the first time in a long time, control. "They thought I was too fragile to travel," I said quietly. "Too dramatic to be included. Too old to matter." Raymond lowered his gaze. "They underestimated you." "Yes," I replied. "They did." I placed the folder on the table in front of me. "This is the first thing they hoped I'd never find." Raymond looked up. First I nodded, sliding the drawer open again. There was more to uncover. Much more. I waited until Raymond left the house that afternoon before pulling the Eastmoreland folder back into my lap. My hands didn't shake this time. There was no fear left for me to feel, only purpose. I picked up the phone and dialed the Multnomah County office. I'd never called them before, not for anything like this. So when a woman answered with a bright records and compliance, "This is Dana speaking," I had to take a breath before responding. "Hello, Dana. My name is Evelyn Hart. I need some information about a property I partially own." "Of course," she said. "What address?" I told her. She asked for my identification, which I provided over email. A minute later, I heard typing through the receiver soft, rhythmic clicks that made my stomach tighten. "All right," Dana said. "I've pulled up the file. What would you like to know?" I swallowed. "Have there been any short-term rentals registered under that property?" More typing. Then a short hum from her, like she'd seen something interesting. "Yes, quite a few. Several weekend rentals, some week-long stays, all registered under a Liana Hart." I closed my eyes. "Was she authorized to do that?" "That depends," Dana replied. "Is she an owner on record?" "No." I said, "I am, and my son," more typing, a small pause. "Mrs. Hart, according to our records, you are still the co-owner. Your signature is legally required for any short-term rental authorization." My throat tightened. "And there are no signatures from me on file." "Are there no?" "Ma'am, none, which means every rental conducted under that address is unauthorized." Her tone softened. "Were you aware these rentals were happening?" "No." I said, "I wasn't told anything. I just found out." Dana exhaled quietly, the kind of breath people let out when they wish they were delivering better news. Unauthorized rentals can result in penalties. It also flags the property for review. I can email you everything on file if you'd like. "Yes." I said immediately, "Please send it." "Sending now," she replied. "You should see multiple documents authorization requirements, the rental history, and the complaint procedures." I stared at the screen as the attachments began arriving one after another, each one confirming what I already knew. I had been erased from decisions that legally required me. Erased, then used. Dana hesitated before speaking again. "Mrs. Hart, do you need help filing a formal review?" Her question landed heavier than anything she had said before. This had moved beyond disrespect, beyond exclusion. This was deception, paper trail deception, actions taken behind my back, my property, my money, my name. "I'm not filing anything yet," I said. "Not today." "All right, but if you need us, we're here." I thanked her and ended the call. The room felt unbearably quiet afterward, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest. I stared at the new stack of documents lighting up my inbox records. Warnings. Proof. I clicked open the report listing every unauthorized rental. More than I expected. More than I ever would have allowed. Footsteps approached the office door. Raymond peeked in. "Are you okay?" "Yes," I said. And this time the word didn't feel like a lie. "I finally understand everything." He stepped inside, cautious. "What did they tell you? That every rental Liana arranged was illegal?" I said, "Every one of them, and that my signature is required for all of it." Raymond's shoulders sagged. The truth settling on him too. "They used your property without asking." I nodded, still staring at the documents. They counted on me never checking, never questioning, never looking too closely. He sat beside me. "What will you do now?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at the folder beside me, thick with signatures that never existed and decisions made without me. The truth was no longer something painful. It was something sharp. And I wasn't going to set it down. Raymond stood in the doorway longer than usual, like he was deciding whether he had earned the right to step into the room. I was still at my desk. The stack of county documents open in front of me. The evidence was loud even in silence. He cleared his throat. "Evelyn, can we talk?" I didn't look up immediately. "Go ahead." He took that as permission and stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You've been quiet all day. I've had a lot to absorb." He sat across from me, elbows on his knees. He hadn't looked this uncertain since the day we told Emily's school she wouldn't be returning. "You're hurt," he said. "I thought I was," I replied. "Now I just feel awake." Raymond rubbed his palms together. I knew something was happening. I didn't understand all of it, but I knew. I finally looked at him. "You knew Liana was shutting me out?" He flinched at the directness. "Not at first, but over the last year, yes. I saw the way she talked to you, the way she controlled what Michael said, the way she managed situations so you would be left out. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know how." He admitted, "I didn't want to make you feel worse. And every time I tried to mention it to Michael, he'd shut down or get defensive. So you stayed silent," I said. He lowered his head. "Yes, and I'm ashamed of that." The word ashamed hit with surprising weight. Raymond wasn't a man who admitted his flaws easily. For him to say it meant he had been carrying it a while. "I should have told you," he whispered. "I should have stepped in sooner." "You should have," I said. No anger, just truth. He nodded slowly, accepting it. I thought, if I stayed neutral, things would settle on their own. "Neutral isn't neutral," I said quietly. "Not when someone is being pushed out. Silence helps the one doing the pushing." Raymond's eyes tightened. "I know, and I'm sorry. Truly." He reached out, resting his hand on the edge of the desk. Not touching mine, but close enough that I could feel the offering. "I don't like conflict," he said. "But I'm done ignoring what's happening. I don't want you fighting this alone." I leaned back in my chair, letting his words settle. For years, I had been the one smoothing tension, softening edges, carrying the emotional labor for everyone in the family. And he had let me, he had relied on it. Now he looked at me with something I hadn't seen in him in a long time resolve. "This ends," he said. "No more pretending. No more letting them dictate how you're treated. Whatever you decide to do next, I'm with you." I studied his face. The guilt in the lines around his eyes. The earnestness in his voice. This was the man I married decades ago, before life made him cautious and quiet. "Good," I said, "because I'm not done." He nodded firmly. "Tell me what you need." For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone in my own house. I closed the laptop, gathered the documents into a neat stack, and breathed out slowly. We weren't smoothing anything over anymore. This time, we were preparing. Liana called the next morning, her voice sugar-sweet in a way that never meant anything good. I put the phone on speaker so Raymond could hear. He sat at the small kitchen table, arms folded, watching me carefully. "Evelyn," she said brightly. "Perfect timing. I was just about to text you. What do you need?" "Liana," I asked, keeping my tone even. She laughed. A soft practiced sound. "Well, we hit a little snag with the house repairs. The plumber said it'll be about $1,400. And Michael and I are stretched thin until his next paycheck. I was hoping you could spot us. Just for a week or two." Raymond's eyes flicked toward me, unsure how I'd answer. For years, I had filled those gaps. The small ones, the big ones. Every quiet emergency they never quite took responsibility for. I used to do it out of love, then out of obligation, then out of habit. Not today. "No," I said. Silence. Not even breath on the other end. "No," she repeated, the brightness in her tone cracking like thin glass. "That's right," I said. "No, I can't help you with that." Another beat of silence. Then a sharper edge entered her voice. "Evelyn, you always help us with these things. It's not a lot. It's temporary." "I heard you," I replied. Michael's voice surfaced faintly in the background. "Mom, everything okay?" "Yes," I said. "Everything is fine." Liana's composure slipped entirely. "I don't understand." "You know we need this." Why would you suddenly refuse because I'm done funding problems I didn't create? I said, you'll need to handle it yourselves. Michael stepped closer to the phone. I could hear it in his voice. Mom, are you upset about something? Did we do something? Raymond exhaled quietly through his nose, not amused. I spoke calmly. Take care of your repair, Michael. You're both capable, Liana snapped. We include you in everything. We always try to make sure you're comfortable. Raymond let out a short, humorless laugh. I covered the receiver slightly and murmured, let me handle it. Then I lifted the phone again. No, I said. You don't include me. You decide for me. That's different. Michael hesitated. Mom, is this because of the trip? That's something we'll talk about soon, I answered. But not right now. Liana scoffed loudly. Unbelievable. After all we do for you. You don't do things for me, I said. You do things around me. There's a difference. She tried again. So you're really saying no? Yes. A long, brittle pause filled the air. I could almost picture her expression, tight jaw, flared nostrils. A smile pulled so thin it could split. Michael sounded confused, caught between us. Mom, you've never said no before. I know, I told him. And that was my mistake. Raymond's eyes met mine. He nodded, slow and approving. Liana inhaled sharply. Fine, forget it. We'll figure it out ourselves. That's what I expect, I said. She hung up without saying goodbye. The kitchen went completely quiet. Raymond leaned back in his chair, a small, proud smile settling on his face. You handled that well, he said. I felt it then, the smallest surge of something warm and steady. Not triumph, not revenge. Just the simple strength of choosing myself. One boundary, one word, and for the first time in years, I felt taller. I set the plates out one by one, not because I cared about the arrangement, but because the quiet routine steadied my hands. The folder sat at the end of the table, closed but heavy in its presence. Raymond watched me from the kitchen doorway, his arms crossed, his expression firm. You don't have to do this tonight. He said, yes, I replied. I do. He didn't argue. At 6 sharp, the doorbell rang. Liana stepped in first. Her smile stretched thin and triumphant, like she had already won a game I hadn't agreed to play. She wore a new coat, cream-colored, expensive, and she looked around my home as if she were assessing it for flaws. Evelyn, she said, voice bright, everything smells wonderful. It's just dinner, I replied. Michael followed her, hands shoved awkwardly into his pockets. His eyes darted everywhere except toward me. Hey, Mom, Raymond stepped forward. Good to see you, son. Michael nodded, but he didn't look relieved. He looked like a man waiting for something to fall. Liana brushed past me toward the dining room. You didn't have to go to all this trouble, she said, already pulling out a chair. Really? We're exhausted. The planning for the trip has been nonstop. That itinerary is packed. Raymond's jaw tightened. I sat down across from them. I'm sure you've been busy. Michael took his seat slowly, glancing at me, then at Raymond, then at the table. He sensed it, the tension humming beneath every breath. Liana didn't. Or maybe she did, but refused to acknowledge it. Dinner began with the kind of small talk that feels like moving furniture with fingertips. Liana talked about Maui like she was auditioning for a travel show. They have this private chef service, she said. He'll cook right in front of us. Michael booked it weeks ago. Raymond looked up. Weeks ago, Michael shifted uncomfortably. Yeah? A while? Liana waved her hand dismissively. We knew early on we wanted this to be a young people trip. Something relaxing. Simple. I folded my napkin slowly. Simple, I repeated. Michael finally looked at me, his face tightening. Mom, please don't make this awkward. I'm not, I said gently. I'm just listening. Liana leaned forward, offering a smile laced with condescension. We really thought you'd understand the decision. Traveling at your age can be, well, demanding. Raymond inhaled sharply. I reached under the table and touched his hand briefly, silently telling him to hold steady. I appreciate the concern, I said, but that's not why we're here. Liana blinked. Then why are we? Because there's something we need to go over. I reached toward the folder. Before the trip. Before anything else. Liana's smile faltered. What is that A record? I said. Several records. Actually, Michael frowned. Mom, what are you talking about? Raymond straightened in his chair, finally looking like he belonged in the moment instead of at the edges of it. I placed the folder in the center of the table. The soft thud of it landing was enough to pull Michael's attention. Liana's eyes narrowed immediately. These, I said, are documents from the county, and from the bank, and from the original purchase of your house. Michael's brow furrowed deeply. Why would you have those? Because, I said, sliding the folder toward them. I never stopped being part of that house. Liana reached for it with irritated confidence. Evelyn, if this is about the money from years ago, it's not about the money, I said. It's about the truth. Raymond sat silently beside me, shoulders squared, no longer shrinking from the moment. Michael opened the folder first. His eyes began scanning the paperwork. Confusion flickered across his face. Then something heavier fear. Mom, why is your name still on the deed? He asked. Liana snatched a page from his hand. Her expression shifted in a single breath from annoyance to alarm. I watched her carefully. You planned a Christmas trip without me. You made decisions without me. You spoke about me as if I couldn't hear you. But this, I tapped the folder lightly. This is something you should have remembered before deciding I was no longer part of your lives. Liana's lips parted, but no words came out. Michael swallowed hard, still staring at the document like it held a truth he had never bothered to learn. And I waited, calm and steady, ready for what the truth would do next. Michael stared down at the documents as if they were written in a language he had never seen. His thumb traced the corner of the page, eyes darting across the lines, trying to make sense of all the places where his assumptions didn't match reality. Liana leaned closer, snatching one of the forms from him. This is old paperwork, she said sharply. It doesn't matter anymore. It matters, I replied. Because nothing was ever transferred. Not one signature, not one filing. Legally, I still own half your house. Michael's head snapped up. Half? Yes, I said calmly. Liana laughed, a brittle, disbelieving sound. This has to be wrong. We've been living there for years, we renovated, we paid for everything. Not everything, I said. Look closer. I slid a second stack toward them, neatly clipped together. Your renovations went through the county without the required co-owner approval. And your short-term rentals, every single one was unauthorized. Michael blinked. Short-term rentals. Liana stiffened. That was just small stuff. Side income. Illegal side income, I clarified. Under a name that didn't have the right to authorize anything. Dana from the Multnomah County office confirmed it this morning. Liana's face drained. You called the county. I did. Raymond shifted beside me, not speaking, but lending his weight to the moment. It was the first time in a long while he didn't look away from them. He didn't soften the blow. He didn't try to calm the room. He let the truth sit exactly where it needed to. Michael swallowed hard. Mom, why didn't you tell us sooner? Why didn't you say something I didn't know? I said, because you both chose to keep it from me. Liana scoffed. We didn't keep anything from you. You're the one who stays out of things. You say you don't want to be involved. I cut her off gently. I never asked to be erased. That's different. Her mouth opened, then shut again. I reached for the final packet, the one with the highlighted sections. Here, I said, your debts. The ones you never mentioned. The late property taxes, the overdue maintenance fees, the contractor that sent 2 letters demanding payment. Michael's face blanched. We meant to take care of that. Things have been tight. Things are always tight. I said, and every time, you came to me, for help, for money, for space. I gave all of it willingly, because that's what family is supposed to do. Liana pushed back her chair with a sharp scrape. So this is payback, revenge. You're doing this because we didn't want you on the trip. No, I said. This is accountability. This is truth. And it's long overdue. Michael placed his elbows on the table and lowered his face into his hands. Every inch of him sagged, like the realization had knocked the breath from his chest. Mom, we didn't mean for any of this to hurt you. You didn't think about whether it would hurt me. I answered. You thought about convenience? Liana's voice trembled now, still angry, but no longer confident. So what are you planning to do? Take the house, throw us out? Raymond straightened. No one said that. But I could hear the fear in her voice. The panic. The calculation falling apart piece by piece. She suddenly saw the very thing she had dismissed for years, that the woman she underestimated held more power than she ever realized. I folded the folder shut with slow, deliberate care. Before we talk about Hawaii, I said, you're going to take responsibility for the decisions you made. All of them. Starting with the truth you tried so hard to hide. Liana swallowed, jaw trembling. Michael looked at me with eyes full of shame. The mask they wore, one polished, one passive, finally began to crack. Liana stared at the documents spread across the table, her breath sharp and uneven. She looked from one page to another as if some hidden line might magically rewrite the truth. This is ridiculous, she muttered. You're blowing everything out of proportion. I kept my voice steady. These are your decisions. Not mine. Michael rubbed his temples. Liana, maybe we should slow down, and she cut him off with a raised hand. No, I'm done tiptoeing around this. Then she turned to me. Eyes narrowed. You're making our lives harder for no reason. You're old, Evelyn. You should stay out of the way. Raymond stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. Enough! The room froze. Liana blinked. Startled. Michael straightened. Confused. Raymond never raised his voice, not in arguments, not in grief, not even during the hardest moments of our marriage. To hear that one word come out of him felt like the house itself had shifted. He stepped closer to me. Do not talk to my wife like that. Liana scoffed, her bravado returning. Oh, please. Someone needed to say it. Not like that, Raymond said. Not with that tone. Not after everything she's done for both of you. Michael swallowed. Silent. I breathed in slowly, letting the words settle, not the insult, but the defense. It had taken years for Raymond to speak up, and now, here he was, standing firm at my side. Liana leaned forward, hands braced on the table. We're trying to build our life. We don't need interference from someone who can't keep up. Raymond's jaw tightened. You don't get to dismiss her. She dismisses herself. Liana snapped back. She always wants to be included, always wants to know everything. I'm tired of catering to her feelings. Michael finally spoke, voice strained. Liana, calm down. No, she shot back. I'm sick of pretending her opinions matter in decisions that don't involve her. Our house, our trip, our lives. She's just a complication. Raymond took a step toward her. You're wrong. Liana glared at him. About what I stood, not loudly, not aggressively, just decisively. About who I am, I said. All eyes turned to me. I have spent years being patient. I continued. Years shrinking myself to keep this family steady. Years ignoring slights, overlooking disrespect, and choosing kindness even when it wasn't returned. Michael looked down. Liana crossed her arms. I kept going. But tonight, you crossed a line you cannot uncross. You talked about me as if I were in the way, as if I didn't belong, as if my age made me disposable. Liana opened her mouth, but I raised a hand, stopping her for the first time in years. No, you will listen. Her jaw snapped shut. I am your husband's mother. I am the grandmother your children might have had. I am the woman who helped you buy your home, who showed up when you needed support, who loved you because Michael did. And you repaid that by cutting me out of your life and calling me a burden. I leaned slightly forward, letting the weight of my words rest exactly where they needed to. I will not be diminished in my own home. Silence settled, deep and cold. Raymond stood beside me. Michael stayed seated. Unable to look at either of us, Liana's face tightened with anger she could no longer disguise, and I knew then, without hesitation, that the next step would not be gentle. The air in the dining room had thickened until it felt like the walls were listening. Liana's last words still hung sharp and ugly in the space between us. Michael stared at the table as if looking up might make everything worse. Raymond stood at my side, steady now, no longer hiding behind silence. I took one step back from the table, letting the weight of everything, the documents, the insults, the years settle into place. Then I straightened my shoulders. Liana, I said, my voice calm and level, get your things and leave. Her head jerked back. What did you just say? You heard me. Michael's head shot up. Mom. I turned to him. Michael, go with your wife. His mouth fell open, but no words came out. Liana pushed her chair back with a hard scrape. You can't be serious. I am. I said, you do not get to sit in my home and call me old, useless, or in the way. You do not get to treat me like I'm disposable. Not anymore. Michael stood halfway, caught between sitting and rising. Mom, please, let's just talk this out. We already talked, I replied. And you both made your positions very clear. Liana let out a bitter laugh. This is delusional. You think you can throw us out because of old paperwork. Because we don't want you on a trip. This is not about Hawaii, I said. This is about dignity. She scoffed. You're overreacting. Raymond stepped forward. No. His voice was firm, unshaking. She's responding. Liana's eyes widened. She hadn't expected him to choose a side. Certainly not mine. I looked at Michael again. You knew she talked about me that way. You heard her. You sat in silence while she chipped away at me piece by piece. So yes, go with your wife. He finally rose to his feet. Mom, it wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. He winced. Raymond moved quietly toward the doorway, positioning himself not as a barrier, but as a witness. He had chosen where he stood tonight. Liana grabbed her coat from the chair. Fine, we're leaving, but don't think for a second we'll forget this. You don't have to. I said, just leave. Michael looked torn, his eyes flicking between us. Mom, is this really what you want? I felt the answer settle deep inside me. Heavy and certain. It's what needs to happen. He swallowed. Then he nodded once. So small it barely counted as agreement. Okay. Raymond stepped aside. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't soften the moment for them. He simply let them pass. Liana marched toward the door, muttering under her breath. Unbelievable. Michael followed slowly. Each step weighted with something he wasn't ready to name. Before he crossed the threshold, he turned to me. Mom, I never meant for this to get so bad. I held his gaze. Meaning doesn't erase what happened. He lowered his head. Liana yanked the door open. Cold air swept in. Are you coming or not? she snapped. Michael stepped into the doorway. "Good night," he whispered without turning back. Raymond closed the door behind them. The lock clicked softly, final, but not cruel. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, full, almost alive. Raymond touched my shoulder gently. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, I am." We stood there together, two people who had spent a lifetime avoiding conflict, now standing in the quiet aftermath of choosing ourselves. The storm had finally passed, and the house, for the first time in years, felt like it belonged to me again. The county review started 2 days after the dinner. I didn't file anything. I simply answered the phone when the clerk called back, asking for a few clarifications. Once the process began, it moved on its own slow at first. Then, with the unstoppable force of something that had been ignored for too long, by the end of the week, the ripple had turned into a wave. Raymond sat beside me on the sofa when I opened the email. Preliminary findings. The subject read, I clicked it. Unauthorized rentals. Improper disclosures. Financial discrepancies. Owner signature absent. Raymond exhaled. Well, there it is. I nodded. Steady. I didn't feel triumphant, just aligned with the truth. By that afternoon, the second email came. Notice of freeze rental revenue accounts, under review. I imagined the moment Liana saw it, her phone lighting up, her smile thinning, her confidence finally cracking. I didn't need to imagine for long. Michael called that evening. His voice trembled. Mom, something's happening. Yes, I said. The review. You knew I knew it was possible, I replied. Not what the county would choose to do. They're just doing their job. He didn't argue. Liana is... She's freaking out. They froze her accounts tied to the rentals. I'm aware. She's saying it's your fault, he said quietly. I closed my eyes for a moment. Michael. The only thing I did was answer questions honestly. He didn't respond. And in that silence, something in him shifted. A tiny break in whatever certainty he had clung to. Then he hung up abruptly. The next morning, I saw the fallout more clearly. My neighbor, Donna, texted me a screenshot from a local community forum. Anyone know YL? Hart's short-term rental listings vanished overnight. Rumor is there's trouble with the county. Raymond glanced over my shoulder. Word travels fast, especially when people brag as loudly as she did. I said. Donna sent another message. I'm not surprised. She always acted like she was above everyone. You doing okay, Evelyn? I typed back. Doing fine, Donna, thank you. But the story didn't slow there. By the next day, 2 more consequences arrived. A letter confirming penalties for unauthorized listings. A notice stating the house could not be used for any short-term rental until the review concluded. Raymond shook his head as we read each line. They thought they could get away with everything. They thought I wouldn't know. I said softly. He reached for my hand. That's the part that hurts most. Maybe it was. Maybe not. The part that lingered deepest was the ease with which they'd built a world without me. By the weekend, the Hawaii trip began to unravel. I heard it first from Michael's short, clipped voicemail. Mom, we canceled the trip. Later that night, he called again, sounding exhausted. We had no choice. The money we were using for the chef and the excursions, those accounts are locked. And Liana's furious. She's blaming everyone. She even told her friends someone sabotaged us. Did you tell her the truth, I asked? I tried, he whispered. She yelled. She threw a mug. She said I embarrassed her. And what did you say back? He hesitated. I didn't say anything. Raymond listened from across the table. When the call ended, he said, he sounds different. He's seeing the cracks. I replied, slowly, 2 days later, it became obvious just how deep those cracks ran. Michael showed up at our door alone. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes dim. "Mom, can I come in?" Raymond waved him inside. He sank onto the couch. "We fought." He said, "She keeps saying this is a misunderstanding, that we shouldn't have involved you in our finances, Bess, that you're punishing us. And what do you think I asked?" He rubbed his face. I don't know what I think. I just know we didn't treat you right, and now everything is falling apart." I sat beside him. "The collapse didn't come from outside, Michael. It came from decisions you both made." He nodded slowly. "I know." Silence settled, heavy but open. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm tired. I'm tired of pretending everything is perfect. I'm tired of the lies. I'm tired of choosing peace by choosing nothing." Raymond leaned against the doorway, watching him with a mix of sorrow and relief. Michael swallowed hard. "I don't know where this leaves us. Me and Liana." I placed a hand on his. "That's for you to decide," I said. "Not out of fear, out of truth." He nodded again, gaze distant, as if seeing the first edges of a life he hadn't considered before. The collapse had begun, but somewhere in those broken pieces, something else was starting to form, something honest, something real, something that might finally stand on its own. The days after the collapse were strangely quiet, not empty, not lonely, just mine. For the first time in years, I woke up without bracing for someone else's need. No panicked texts from Liana, no guilt-laced calls from Michael, no requests for money, favors, or understanding I no longer had the strength to give. Raymond noticed it first. "You're breathing easier," he said one morning as he handed me my coat. "Maybe I am," I replied. I walked to Laurelhurst Park that afternoon, a place I hadn't visited since before Michael married. The community center by the east entrance had a small sign taped to the window. "Watercolor meetup, Thursdays at 10. New members welcome." I lingered outside long enough for an older woman to open the door and smile at me. "You coming in?" she asked. Her name turned out to be Nora Short Gray Hair, Warm Eyes, voice like she'd lived through storms and survived all of them. "I haven't painted in 20 years, I told her. "Well," she said, stepping aside. "Then you're overdue." Inside, a handful of women worked quietly at long tables. Soft chatter filled the room, nothing dramatic, nothing sharp, nothing demanding, just life in its gentlest form. A woman named Kathleen slid a palette toward me. "Sit," she said. "You look like someone who needs color." I surprised myself by laughing. Just a little. Maybe I do. For the next hour, I let myself dip into memories that had nothing to do with Michael or Liana. I painted crooked tulips and a lake scene that looked more like a spilled drink. But the act of creating, of choosing color, of letting my hands move freely, felt like pulling air into parts of my lungs I had forgotten existed. After class, Nora invited me for coffee at a small shop across from the park. We sat by the window, steam rising from our mugs. "You look lighter," she said, studying me without judgment. "I suppose I finally stopped carrying things I wasn't meant to." She nodded. "That's the hardest part, isn't it? Putting something down when you've held it for decades." Her words settled in me like warm tea. "I'm learning, and that's enough." She said, throughout the next week, I found myself building small rituals. Morning coffee alone on the porch, quiet, slow, without the shadow of someone else's expectations. Afternoon walks with Raymond where we talked about everything except family drama. A therapy appointment he encouraged me to schedule. The therapist listened gently and didn't flinch when I admitted things I had swallowed for years. One afternoon, after I finished a watercolor of a purple iris, Raymond came into the office and watched me for a moment. "You're different," he said softly. "How so?" "You're coming back." I set the brush down. I didn't realize how much I'd lost until I stopped shrinking to fit their comfort. He sat beside me, taking my paint-stained hand in his. "I should have protected you sooner." "We're here now," I said. "That's enough." In the evenings, I cooked dinner without rushing. I played old jazz records we hadn't listened to since we were newly married. I let the house feel full again, not with people, but with presence. One night, while washing dishes, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. I didn't look younger. I didn't look changed. I simply looked like myself, a woman who had survived disappointment, carried love imperfectly, and finally stepped out from the shadows of other people's choices. Raymond wrapped an arm around my shoulder. "You look peaceful," he murmured. I leaned into him, feeling the truth of it settle deep. Peace wasn't loud. It wasn't triumphant. It wasn't even happy. It was steady, and it finally belonged to me. Michael knocked 3 times soft, uneven, almost hesitant. Raymond and I were finishing dinner when the sound came. He looked toward the door. "Is that—" "Yes," I said quietly. "It's him." Raymond stayed in the kitchen while I walked to the foyer. When I opened the door, Michael stood on the porch with his hands in his pockets, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. He looked older than his 39 years, like the past few weeks had carved something heavy into him. "Mom," he said softly. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. "Of course." He entered slowly, looking around the house like he wasn't sure he deserved to be there. Raymond joined us, giving Michael a small nod before returning to the living room to give us space. Michael stood in the center of the room, shoulders slumped. "I owe you an apology," he said, "a real one." I folded my hands. "Go on." He ran a shaking hand through his hair. "I should have stopped it. All of it. The way she talked to you. The decisions we made without you. Everything. I should have stepped in." "You didn't," I replied gently, not to punish him, but because we couldn't move forward without honesty. He nodded, swallowing hard. "I know, and I've been thinking about it every night." We sat, only a small coffee table between us. He didn't speak right away. When he finally did, his voice was low. "Liana, she didn't start out this way. Or maybe she did, and I didn't want to see it." He clasped his hands together. "She pushed me to create distance, said it was normal for married couples to cut the cord. She said you were too involved, too emotional, too much." I listened in silence, letting him find the words. "She'd get angry if I didn't agree." He continued, "Little things at first, then bigger ones. She'd sulk for hours if I visited you. She'd accuse me of choosing you over her, and when you helped us with money, she always said it was just repayment for raising me." I felt something tighten in my chest, not anger, but grief for the boy who had gotten lost under all that pressure. "I got used to keeping the peace," he whispered, "but trying to make her happy meant hurting you. And I didn't stop it. I didn't protect you." I reached for the tissue box, placing it on the table between us. He didn't take one, but he stared at it like he deserved the entire box. "I was scared to lose her," he admitted. "And somewhere in the middle of all that, I lost you instead." His voice cracked. I leaned back, taking him in this man who once held my hand at the grocery store because he was too shy to walk alone. This man who used to call me from college at 2 a.m. because he didn't know how to unclog a drain. This man who had slowly drifted away. Not by choice, but by influence he never learned to resist. "Michael," I said softly, "I forgive you." His head snapped up, eyes wet. "How? After everything? How can you say that?" "Because you came here," I replied. "And because you told the truth. But forgiveness isn't forgetting. And it isn't pretending the harm didn't happen. We start from honesty, nothing less." He nodded slowly. absorbing each word. I want to rebuild, he said. If you'll let me, I will, I said, but with boundaries. I'm not shrinking myself again, Shanada. I'm not bending to keep the peace. If we rebuild, it will be healthy, equal, respectful. He let out a long breath like he'd been holding it for months. I can do that, he said. I want to do that. Raymond reappeared then. Offering Michael a cup of tea, Michael accepted it with both hands. Grateful, the three of us sat together in a quiet that felt different from before, less like tension. More like possibility. The bond wasn't restored. Not yet. But it wasn't broken anymore either. It was something in between, fragile, real, and worth protecting. The county letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Tucked neatly between a grocery flyer and a utilities bill, I opened it at the kitchen table, with sunlight warming the edge of the page. Raymond stood behind me, resting a hand on my shoulder as I read the final decision. Penalties assigned to primary managing party Liana Hart. Unauthorized rental earnings frozen, pending repayment. Record of violations entered into county property logs. Raymond exhaled slowly. It's done. Yes, I said. It is. There was no gloating inside me, no bitterness, no vindictive thrill, just the quiet satisfaction of truth. Finally being recognized. Liana had run a game for years, controlling, manipulating, exploiting, and she had gambled on the assumption that no one would call her on it. She lost. 2 days later, Michael came by with an update. He stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than usual. She's leaving Portland, he said, moving back to her sister's place in California. I nodded. I figured. She says everyone here knows. His voice cracked. She can't go anywhere without hearing rumors. She created them, I said gently. He nodded, eyes wet. I know. We sat in the living room, a quiet comfort settling between us. After a long pause, he added, I'm starting therapy. I already had my first session. Good, I said. Take it seriously. I am. He leaned forward slightly. And I want us to rebuild, slowly. I know it will take time. I'm willing to do the work. I touched his hand, just once. So am I. After he left, I walked into my office, my real office now, not the storage room of other people's needs, and opened the folder containing my estate plans. I called my attorney and made the updates I'd been considering for weeks. Remove Liana entirely. I said, she receives nothing, and the funds you wanted to allocate to the women's program. All of it, I replied. Let it help women who've been exploited financially? Women like me. He paused. You sound certain. I am. When we ended the call, I stared at the updated documents with a sense of steadiness I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't taking anything from Liana. She had taken enough from herself. That evening, I stood in my living room and let the silence settle, a different kind of silence now. Not the tense quiet of being pushed to the margins. Not the numb quiet of betrayal. This was peace. Raymond entered, holding 2 cups of chamomile tea. Thinking, he asked. Remembering, I said. And choosing. He handed me a cup and sat beside me on the couch. Choosing what? My life, I said. The one that belongs only to me. He smiled softly. I'm proud of you. I leaned my head against his shoulder. I'm proud of me too. Later that week, I returned to the Laurelhurst art class. Nora greeted me with a grin. Back so soon? Yes, I said. Setting my brushes down, I don't plan on disappearing again. She squeezed my arm. Good. You're too interesting to lose. As the room buzzed with easy laughter and watercolor chatter, I felt that truth settle deep inside me. I wasn't shrinking anymore. I wasn't bending. I wasn't apologizing. I had walked through betrayal, through exclusion, through silence, and I had come out whole. And now I had a life that was finally, irrevocably mine. If you're listening to this and it reminds you of your own battles, tell us in the comments. Hit like, share your story, and subscribe for more.